I remember the first time I ever heard the name How I Met Your Mother. I must have been about 10 years old and I was eating dinner. And the TV in the living room was showing this story about this TV show, which made no sense to me because why cover a news story on a TV show? And the story was about its ending and how no one liked it. It was disliked so much that apparently the creators made a brand new ending just to satiate the fans. I remember my sisters talking about it because they were apparently really big fans of the show and were very much disappointed by the ending. In the following weeks, my sisters would watch repeats of the show in the main living room. I would be there sometimes just to watch it with them. I remember the first time I ever said the words, "Wow, Ted is an idiot." It was season 1, episode 21, named Milk, where he didn't go on this date with this perfect girl because he wanted a girl he knew it would not end well with. I think that was the first ever episode I ever saw. And yeah, I told myself, wow, this guy's an idiot. That will not be the last time I ever say that. Eventually, I began to watch the show myself, and it quickly became my favorite show of all time. I loved the humor, I loved the characters, and I love how it portrayed the highs and lows of life. And I remember by season 7, I was thinking to myself, how can this show end badly? It's so good. And then I saw it. Oh no. When I first saw it, I really did not like it. But that was 6 years ago. I checked. Since then, I have re-seen the show over and over again, with this fall being my 6th or 7th rewatch. And this time, something changed. I rewatched the ending and I didn't hate it. In fact, I couldn't hate it. Mainly because I get it now. When I first watched it, I simply did not understand why they made this ending. It seemed like nonsense, but now I think I see the vision. I think I understand what the creators were going for when they made it. And today, I would like to explain why I think the ending actually works. How I Met Your Mother was created by two men, Carter Bays and Craig Thomas. The show was crafted with very different inspirations. Firstly, the show was inspired by the pair's actual love experience, with them actually living in New York. One was single looking for love, and the other was engaged. Secondly, the show is inspired by its predecessors, mainly Friends. The composition of the friend group is very similar to the ones we see in Friends. I think this comparison is done more eloquently by this other YouTuber called Kroos. I will link his video down below. You have the playboy, the couple of the group, and the main love interests who met in the first episode, with the main drama of the show coming from them. No Phoebes though. I'm not sure why. They did take some liberties reinventing them. Throughout most of Friends, Joey was portrayed as this cool ladies man, with that being his dominant character trait, and also being stupid, but that doesn't really count I think. And he pretty much remained the same even in his own spin-off show. His reincarnation, Barney, seems to view his character in a different lens. The show does try to address the fact that a man who goes around sleeping with random women and not calling them back is in fact very sleazy and really pathetic. Moreover, Barney does actually have a character arc. His sex pest demeanor is revealed to be tied to his trauma in his past, and he ends the show being a better person, or so we think. We'll get to that. Chandler and Monica are two friends who eventually get together later on, with them finishing the show as parents. Lily and Marshall are two characters who took this idea, but spun it. Instead of being friends who became lovers, the show makes them a couple at the beginning, and begins the show with Marshall's proposal. With that out of the way, they can now show the trials and tribulations that comes with being married and starting a family in much more detail than the Friends ever could. And finally, we get to our main love interests, Ross and Rachel, the two who begin as friends with their underlying love for each other pushing the plot forward. The classic will they won't they? Well, they do. And it was pretty great the first time, like in season 2, but then I think the writers hit a problem. Viewer interest in the show began to lower, which makes sense. The main tension of every episode is gone now, so they did something which I noticed many other rom-coms also do. They broke them up. Not forever, obviously. The plan was for them to get back together by the end, but this breakup now became the main tension of the show, which kind of ruined the characters in my opinion, but also I think people are way too mean to them and critical, but that's neither here nor there. My main issue with the will they won't they, which I think many other people also experience, is that they always do end up together. Ross and Rachel's reunion was always inevitable. They even sprinkled clues to that fact throughout the show. In many ways, this makes this type of drama very cheap, or at worst, non-existent. And call me crazy, but I think that's something that the creators of How I Met Your Mother wanted to avoid. Even though it is never stated anywhere, I do think there is one other big inspiration for the show. A book called Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I will be completely honest, I did not read this book, nor do I intend to. I'm already busy reading books for other classes, so I don't have time to read this one. But I do think this book is an inspiration for two main reasons. Number one, it's said to be Ted's favorite book, and number two, the main plot of the book parallels the plot of How I Met Your Mother. So, the plot of Love in the Time of Cholera is the story of two lovers who, after meeting again 51 years later, finally decide to get together after the woman's partner dies. Calling them lovers is a bit generous in my opinion. For most of the book, she hates him, especially after he decides to confess his love for her right after her husband's funeral. That actually sounds like something Ted would do, but whatever. But the book is able to build up to their love over time. It's a story about everlasting love, and more importantly, the idea that someone can have more than one soulmate. That after one true love, you can still have another true love, even at the end of your life. And I think this is where the showrunners got their idea for the finale. Their solution to solve the will they won't they problem. Just do both. The story of How I Met Your Mother, at its inception, was one about everlasting love and the idea that you can have multiple great love stories. Here's a more streamlined synopsis. This is the story of Ted Mosby, a man who is trying to convey to his kids and the audience that a lifetime ago, he had another great love in his life. But due to their current circumstances, they couldn't be together. And it took him another great love to make him realize he wishes to rekindle things with the first one. And here we find an almost perfect solution to the issue. Even though Ted and Robin are portrayed as love interests, we as the audience know that their love will not last. It just can't. There is this one scene in season 1 which I think encapsulates this feeling perfectly. It's season 1, episode 11, The Limo, where Ted and Robin kiss on New Year's Eve. And there is this somber feeling to the whole scene. Yes, it is hopeful because it shows that even though Robin is with that rich guy, there might be hope for those two in the future. But on a larger scale, we know this great romance can't last. The scene is hopeful yet hopeless, romantic yet sad. The perfect but doomed romance is supposed to make the viewer sad, but the big shocking surprise is that they do end up together decades later. The ultimate will they won't they. And there you have it, a unique but interesting and touching take on the rom-com genre. So what exactly went wrong? I think that's a complicated question, because even though the answer is the ending, there are different components to the ending. One big reason as to why people believe the ending was the way it was because the writers kind of wrote themselves into a corner. Around the time of season 2, fearing that the actors for the children may grow up too fast, they decided to film the planned ending, which was the dialogue of the kids at the ending. To make sure that no one else knew, only a select few people were actually in the room during the filming period. They then buried the footage and made the children sign NDAs. The footage was only resurfaced when they filmed the season finale. This action forced the show to go only one direction. Many TV shows with planned endings had to change due to different reasons. But How I Met Your Mother put itself on tracks that they knew they could not veer away from. But in my opinion, that's fucking bullshit. Regardless of what they filmed, they easily could have just scrapped it and filmed something else, where the kids aren't kids anymore. But I'm pretty sure that with some editing, this could easily be maneuvered around. They could have just had filmed an ending where the kids weren't there. They could have just brought back the actors and played a scene with only their voices. They didn't need to do this. The idea that they were trapped is just not true. They wanted this ending. The finale they wrote contains several faults, but I think we can see one major problem with all of them. The way it affects and destroys four characters: Ted, Robin, Tracy, and Barney. Let's begin with Barney. As I said before, the entire character arc of Barney was one of a broken man becoming whole again by finding true love. His love with Robin was one that the show hinted at since season 1. That being season 1, episode 14, titled Zip Zip Zip. In the episode, Barney hits on Robin. He then proceeds to list all the reasons why he thinks they would be great together. Of course, it didn't work out, mainly because Barney was simply not at the emotionally mature level in his life to be with her. But on some level, he was right about them being perfect together at that time. Barney was a man who was damaged by his upbringing and his early adult life. His father was simply not present, and his only male role model, who turned out to actually be his father, showed him the benefits of living a never-ending, exciting life. Something that even he would admit is inherently destructive. His first ever girlfriend, Shannon, broke his trust in a way that radicalized him away from his own emotions and onto a life of sex and money. And I'm pretty sure that his experience with Shannon plays a major role in the way he treats women throughout the show. He's not willing to let any of them too close out of fear of being hurt again. So instead, he keeps them all at a distance by simply getting into their pants and never contacting them ever again. The obvious irony here being that, in his attempt to never be hurt again, he ends up inflicting the same pain he felt towards these one-night stands, and sometimes actual physical harm.
I'm pretty sure I sold a woman. I didn't speak the language, but I shook a guy's hand, he gave me the keys to a Mercedes, and I left her there.
What the fuck? His journey of self-discovery is about learning to love again. Many people in his life helped him reach that goal, mainly his friendships, finding his dad again, and appreciating his mom more. But I do think the most important relationship he explores is the one with his partners. His exes, like Quinn or Nora, helped him to let people in again, but neither really worked out. One was because he couldn't trust her, and the other was because he couldn't trust himself. But then came Robin, a love he rekindled, and now he was in a place where it could work. I liked them together, I really did. And then the last episode happened. They broke up because neither were happy traveling together. Now Barney was exactly where he was at the beginning of the story. He was, yet again, a womanizer, and stayed that way for several years. All those years of development just gone. But he was able to find stability again when he became a father. Honestly, I don't hate this ending. It's just that it's so rushed, you know? His entire character throughout 9 seasons was just tarnished. And then they tried to tack on this storyline at the very last minute. It just leaves a really bad taste in my mouth, which only ends Barney on a really weird note. How the ending of the show ruined Ted and Robin is intertwined, so we might as well talk about them together. As we said, the idea was that they were the couple that were supposed to end up together at the very end of the show, even as it kind of ruins the relationships they were already in. The thing is, my only problem with this is that there does not seem to be enough build-up to this event, or any proper development afterwards. Before the last 2 episodes, the idea that these 2 characters might end up together was basically opposed by the show itself. In season 7, episode 17, titled No Pressure, Ted confessed his feelings for her for the 40th time. They talked about it, and he asked her point blank, "Do you love me?" And while looking directly into his eyes, she said no. But even then, it was pretty clear that Ted never really moved on. By the wedding, he was still madly in love with her. And in one final moment, the two talk about their feelings on the beach. In that moment, he seems to emotionally and physically let her go. which was development he needed before he gave Tracy all of his time and focus. On several occasions, the two clearly let go of each other, and they make it clear to the audience that they're just friends. You know, at least in Friends, Ross and Rachel seem to be destined for each other. Even after the breakup, it only made sense they would end up together in the end. They never stopped loving each other. They were already married. Hell, they had a kid together. So by the finale, when they kiss, their reunion just makes sense. But not here. The show keeps telling us that these two do not like each other anymore. And yes, that was the point, as they both needed to move on so they could find each other later on in life. But there still should have been some clues to the reunion. Or at the very least, take more time to establish the romance in the future. Moreover, there is the topic of whether their love was good for them in the first place. I feel like people are way too mean to Robin, which breaks my heart because she is my favorite character in the whole show, but even I can admit she has her flaws. While I was writing this video, I saw this compilation of Robin, which compiled every single time she showed interest in Ted. And the problem was that in almost every single occasion, she only showed interest when she realized he wasn't available anymore. She starts showing interest in Ted when she sees him kiss Victoria. She shows interest when she realizes Ted is going to marry Stella. And yet again, she shows interest in the finale when her marriage didn't pan out and she sees how happy Ted is. This, to put it simply, is not endearing. She seems to flip-flop on Ted so many times, it just becomes annoying. And those moments really make you wonder if Robin ever actually liked Ted, or just saw him as a potential safety net for the future. And to be completely fair, she does have this history of only wanting things when she knows she can't have it anymore. Personally, I do think that Robin did love Ted, but life kind of got in the way of that. And then there's Ted. Ted seems to still love Robin no matter what, but this love is questionable. All logic seems to point to the fact that these two should just not be together. The two want completely different things out of life. That was the main reason why they broke up in the first place. And yet, he seems to always ignore this fact. This obsession is something he has throughout the entire show. Even when she stopped reciprocating. Even when she was engaged to his best friend. This behavior is just so disruptive, to put it mildly. And this isn't even mentioning the fact that their union seems to destroy other perfect relationships. Some would say with people they were just better with, like Tracy. But she was put aside for arguably a worse relationship. Speaking of which, the entire show was building up to this moment. To the moment we meet her. We were teased about her so many times, given small information about her throughout the show. And let me be clear, I and many others did not have high hopes beforehand. The show built up to her so much, I thought there was no chance she might actually live up to expectations. But she did it. She was basically everything everyone expected and more. In one short season, she became the best person Ted ever dated. I find that very interesting, because when you boil down her personality, she is just basically Ted, but without any of the negative traits. She's this nerdy and adventurous, hopeless romantic, but she isn't pretentious or self-sabotaging like someone else we know. In Season 9, Episode 16, titled How Your Father Met Me, we got to see her entire backstory, allowing us to sympathize with her, especially after hearing what she went through with the passing of her ex, Max. Even after all that heartbreak, she was able to love again and live a happy life with Ted. And then she died. One thing that many people say is that this moment came out of nowhere, but that is simply untrue. The show has been hinting at this twist the entire time. There is the obvious, like why would a father be telling his children how he met their mother? Maybe because she isn't around anymore and they want to reminisce. In Season 9, Episode 20, titled The Time Traveler, there are more concrete hints, like when Ted runs over to her house because he wants those extra 45 days with her. In Season 9, Episode 9, titled Platonish, we get to see both of them in their older age, and they keep talking in double meaning. In one scene, they talk about how when something is too painful to discuss, it's just best to leave it unsaid. In that moment, we think they're talking about the wedding and about how they're not sure when they're all going to be together again. But in retrospect, you notice how Ted and Tracy are looking at each other when they say that, and noticing how Tracy is the one who actually says the words. Moreover, a bit later on, she says, "What kind of mother wouldn't show up to her daughter's wedding?" And when she says that, Ted cries. With all of these clues, it's at least clear to me that at this point in the timeline, Tracy is already sick, and she most likely doesn't have that much time to live. Which makes sense, right? That would explain why they're taking a second honeymoon. But I think the most interesting part of this entire conversation is how Tracy seems to be content. She seems to have accepted what's going to happen to her, but Ted hasn't. It's so painful he won't even say it. And just thinking about it makes him cry, with Tracy having to console him. But I think one of my favorite clues is on their first date. In season 9, episode 21, titled Gary Blauman, where at the end of their date, Ted says this.
What are you doing?
Remembering this.
Come on.
Okay, question. Do you think that was Ted in the moment saying that? Or do you think that was future Ted forcing his way into the memory? That wouldn't be too far-fetched, right? In the final season, the show works a lot with the fourth wall break. Or in this instance, future Ted talking to his kids from the memory itself. So I don't think Ted actually said this in the moment. I think this is future Ted trying to force his way into the memory because he just wants to stay there for longer. Because even after all these years, just remembering her brings him joy. But let's make one thing clear. Just because it was hinted at does not mean it was good. Because let's be honest, the only reason why she died was so she could make way for Robin. Therefore, Tracy's entire character was just made as an obstacle between Ted and Robin. In my opinion, out of all the characters who get ruined by the ending, I think Tracy gets it the worst. Because by the end, she is no longer a character. She was a fully realized and interesting character at the beginning, but by the end, she is reduced and cast aside as a stepping stone for another relationship, one which is debatably worse. And there you have it, the worst ending of all time, one which ruins the character of almost all their leads, except Marshall and Lily. They're always great. One question many people have is, what were the writers thinking? But as much as I might not agree with it, I think I do get it. The last 2 episodes tried to capture the main message of the book, the idea of everlasting love in the face of endings, and the idea of second soulmates. And if you keep that in mind, I think they did a pretty good job conveying that. Let me explain. Let's begin with how this idea is explored with Barney. One line from the finale which always stuck with me is something that Barney says in Last Forever Part 1. When Barney and Robin announce their divorce, Barney says, and I quote, "It's not a failed marriage, it's a successful marriage which only lasted 3 years." This on face value makes no sense, right? How can a successful marriage end early? We do have this conception that love is never ending, and if you love someone, you will stay with them forever. This means that the only reason why you would ever leave someone is if that love is gone. But Barney doesn't believe that to be true, and I really can't blame him. His entire life has shown him that relationships can just end. In almost all of his past relationships, they ended, but not because he ever stopped loving them. He stopped dating and almost marrying Quinn, not because he didn't love her, but because they couldn't trust each other. He stopped seeing Nora, not because he stopped loving her, but because he also loved Robin and did something really, really, really stupid. His life has shown him that true love prevailing just isn't real. But that doesn't mean that's inherently a bad thing. The time that Barney and Robin had together still meant the world to him, even if he didn't show it all the time. In the end, he loved all these women, but due to outside problems and also his own vices, he had to end it. To end his story properly, the writers then decided to give Barney a love that will never end or stop in any shape or form. His daughter. As I said, I actually like this ending. I just hate how rushed it is. What this ending for Barney tries to tell us on a grander narrative is a lesson on the nature of love, that perhaps human nature can get in the way of it. Barney's envy and jealousy ended his relationship with Quinn, and his lust ended his relationship with Nora. With Robin, what ended things was his own happiness. He just simply wasn't happy traveling everywhere with her. But traveling was what made Robin happy. Therefore, there's just this inherent incompatibility. Look, Barney is always going to love Robin, but I think the story is trying to convey a message about obstacles, and that stopping a relationship is not the same as giving up on it, especially if you know there's an obstacle too big for you to overcome. Now let's move on to Tracy. The idea of everlasting love in the face of its ending is something that's integral to her character. Unlike Barney, who had to move on from his love due to more vain reasons, Tracy was tackling the same issue of ending a great love, but because of death. It should be mentioned that even though we do see Ted move on from Tracy to be with Robin, this journey is paralleled with Tracy as she also moves on from a great love, Max, to be with Ted. I think the reason why Tracy was the one who was supposed to teach Ted this lesson about second great loves was because she also experienced it. When she did it, the show clearly demonstrates that it wasn't a betrayal. She appreciated the time she had with Max, but needed to move on for both their sakes. She even asked Max for permission to do so. I think in this instance, she learned two lessons. Firstly, that regardless of how things ended with Max, she will always love him. Never-ending love can survive more than just a breakup. It can survive death and the grief that comes with it. And secondly, the never-ending love she feels for Max does not mean that she could never allow herself to feel someone else's love. She does not need to commit herself to him forever to not feel like she's betraying him. She is allowed to feel love again and move on. But moving on does not mean left behind. He will always be a part of her. And in many ways, she does try to explain why doing so would be a bad thing. Being committed to a past person means that on some level, you are letting yourself be stuck in the past, trapped in all that guilt and sadness that comes with it. I think what she's saying is sometimes it's okay to look to the future. In that one episode where we see them in their older age, yes, they're hinting at her death, but at the same time, they're hinting at something more than that. That yes, she can die, but that won't be the end of everything. As she says herself, life only moves forward. All the advice and lessons she learned allowed her to grow from her grief of losing Max, so that she and Ted could work and live a happy 10 years together. And yes, this lesson was passed on to Ted. As I said with Barney, one of the main lessons he learns is being able to love someone even if that means the relationship doesn't last. That people can break up but still love each other. I think his idea of a successful marriage only lasting 3 years does more to exemplify the relationship of Ted and Robin. They were two people who were really happy together, but they had different goals. Ted wanted a family, while Robin didn't. Ted also wanted to build a skyscraper in New York City, which means he had to stay in New York, while Robin wanted to explore the world. And for that reason, they decided to break up before things got ugly in the long run. They still loved each other, but due to circumstances, they had to end things. And when they both went their separate ways, they had to let go of each other. In many ways, it was a successful relationship which only lasted 1 year. The fact that they still loved each other was apparent. The will they won't they kept happening throughout the series. However, they didn't. Robin was able to become a world-renowned reporter and was able to explore the world, achieving her dream. Ted found Tracy and was able to spend 10 years together and raise 2 children. After her death, he spent his time raising them, and now they're all grown up, with Penny on their way to college. They are both at a point in their life where they have achieved their dreams. Their everlasting love that could not be just became possible again. Even after all this time, Robin was willing to give it another try between them. She made that very clear during one of the deleted scenes, which, considering its timing, most likely occurred around the time Tracy passed away. Kind of inappropriate, but whatever. But this time, the problem was Ted. People like to say Ted moved on way too fast, but he really didn't. The timescape throughout the finale really works against the story. It makes these events look sudden, but in real time, they happen in the span of years or even decades. Therefore, Ted's changing feelings towards Robin in the finale are not sudden or anything. They actually happen throughout several years of thinking about it. But I think all of this doesn't matter in the face of one singular fact. Ted loved Tracy. He loved her more than he loved anyone else. In an ideal world, the two of them would have died old together. But they didn't, because death is sudden. I think that's another important lesson that How I Met Your Mother tries to convey, mainly through the death of Marshall's dad. You can't just pretend like the ending never happened. After all, death of the author and all that. But a part of me really hates that, because I feel like you're not trying to engage with the story presented to you. Ted loves Tracy, but Tracy died 6 years ago in 2024. Spent those 6 years taking care of his kids while also keeping her in his heart. But he wasn't allowing himself to move on. One massive complaint people have is that the entire show is way too long. Ted did not need to recount all those 9 years. But I also think that's the point. Future Ted at this point was someone who likes to reminisce way too much. He is someone who tends to get stuck in his own stories. In other words, he is someone stuck in the past. That's why, in many ways, reminiscing about Tracy was therapeutic for him, and he was able to remember her through her lessons of moving on. But he wasn't sure if he was allowed to move forward. I mean, he did try. As the kids say, the entire story was basically Ted trying to ask his children if it was okay to move on. Not move on from Tracy, no, but ask if it's okay to move forward, to be able to not be stuck in the past, to be able to feel love again, to be able to ask out Robin. Similar to how Tracy asked Max if it was okay for her to move on. The journey of Ted Mosby is one that many people have tried to describe, and in the last few years, it has been boiled down to make him look really bad. But in my opinion, the story of Ted Mosby is of a man trapped in his past, allowing himself to move forward and find love in his heart again, thanks to the lessons he learned along the way, and with the blessing with the people around him. It's a journey of self-discovery and transformation, and by the end, he does. He steals the blue French horn one final time, goes over to Robin's apartment, rings the doorbell, and then, well, Marshall wins a bet. Thanks for watching. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you make it this far, thank you, it means a lot. This is the longest video I ever made, and it was really hard but really fun. And hey, if you like these kind of longer videos, let me know, because I plan on making more. Anyways, again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.